attendees are in listen-only mode.
Hello, thank you for joining us today at the Dibble webinar. I'm Irene Varley, Director of Education for the Dibble Institute, and joining me today from the Dibble team is Kathy Gidray, our webinar organizer. Hi, Kathy.
Hi, good afternoon, everyone.
Well, before we begin, I'd like to point out a few housekeeping tips. If you should experience any audio difficulties during this broadcast, please note the phone number listed here or on the link in your email connecting you to this webinar. You can both listen on the phone while viewing the broadcast on your computer. We recommend that you use earphones while connected to the broadcast. Should you have any technical questions, please send inquiries through that question box located on the control panel. Just look for it now, please. And we will be asking a poll question and asking you to raise your hand as well. Take a look on your control panel to see the hand icon in the question at the top of your screen, of your control panel rather. There's a little hand icon. Excuse me. We'll have some time for specific questions and comments at the end of the presentation. So if you could kindly hold your questions towards the end of the presentation, that will help Kathy to disseminate the questions. If your question isn't addressed during the time, you will definitely receive an email from us. Like all our webinars, this broadcast is being recorded and will be accessible on our website by Friday. We invite you to share it with colleagues who could not attend today. Well, as you know, this is Valentine's week, and I'm sure all of you have special Valentine people in your life. Well, we at Dibble have you as our Valentine special, and so we would like to offer you at the end of this webinar a special gift. So listen in to the end of the webinar for a special Dibble gift. Well, a hearty welcome to all our new listeners today. For those of you unfamiliar with us, the Dibble Institute is a national independent nonprofit organization dedicated to equipping young people with the skills and knowledge they need to develop healthy romantic relationships now and for their future. And on our screen, you will see that's Charlie Dibble, our founder, with his wife, Helen. Charlie dedicated his retirement years to working with young people. From them, he heard many painful stories following their parents' relationship issues. This and his own concerns for family members moved him to identify issues, research, and solutions regarding young people's love lives. Thus, the Dibble Institute was founded. You can read more about Charlie's story on our website's homepage at the very top in the blue toolbar, and it's indicated About Us. People new to us often ask what our value platform is. And well, all too often young people seek a love connection lacking boundary setting, healthy communications, conflict resolution, and other essential relationship skills. We strive to address the current research issues facing young people today. Our programs never assume the gender of the young person's partner, and we have written scenarios with input from young people that address all kinds of current relationship situations. Let me tell you a little bit about our speaker today, Elsbeth Martindale. Elsbeth is a clinical psychologist from Portland, Oregon, with over 25 years of experience. Dr. Martindale is the author of Things to Know Before You Say Go cards, which we carry in our Dibble bookstore. Elsbeth was concerned that her clients were not asking the deeper questions they needed to consider in order to protect their hearts. She also has those same type of issues that she's going to talk about today. And in answering those questions, she will present to us the different ways of protecting the heart during Valentine's Day in building healthy relationships. It is my pleasure to present Dr. Elsbeth Martindale. Hi, Elsbeth.
Hi. It's great to be here today exploring this really wonderful topic about helping teens find happy relationships, long-lasting potential partnerships. It's a passion of mine. I'm trying to hook up my slideshow here. Let me make that happen. There we go. I'm going to talk about 10 ways that you can help the teens that are in your life improve their chances of having a great romance. You can see the picture on the screen is of two teens floating on the water, and I really like this image because of two aspects. One is this floating on the vast and murky, exciting waters of romance, and how dangerous that can be if we're not prepared, if we don't have our personal flotation device available to us. We need to find ways to build these and offer these flotation devices for our teens as they go into partnership and romance, so they don't get swept under or drowned in unhealthy partnerships and relationships or be ill-prepared in their exploration of partnership. So let me talk about 10 ways that, 10 important strategies for helping teens improve their chances for great romance. The first is we want to help teens know what matters to them. So we want to ask teens, I want to suggest to teens that they know what matters to you, or what's important to you. This is probably the most important of the questions that I would suggest we ask our teens. I think it's hard to make a good choice in a partner if you don't know what you're pairing it with. So we need to create space and time for our teens to explore their values, their preferences, so that they can identify what matters most to them first before they go into partnership. Someone told me once that there are two tasks of adolescence. One is to figure out where I'm going, and the other is who I'm going with. And there's a lot of danger if we get those in the wrong order. So let's start a hand raise here and tell me how many of you were given encouragement to explore and identify your own values and preferences before you started dating. Let's just get a number on that, and Kathy will tally that up and then give me that information in just a minute. How many of you were given encouragement to explore and identify your values and preferences before you started dating? Yogi Berra says, if you don't know where you're going, you'll end up someplace else. I believe that when your values are clear to you, making decisions becomes much easier. I find this true consistently in my work as a psychotherapist. The more I help people identify their values, the clearer the paths are in front of them. So, Kathy, what's the percentage?
Well, it looks like there are about 12 people out of the 90 who say yes to that question.
Wow, it's lower than I thought. And that's surprising and sad, right? Let's do different for our teens. Let's make this discussion of values and preferences available to them. So how do we help teens explore their values? Interesting question, right? Before we can help, we need to understand. Before we understand, we need to listen. Before we listen, we need to be quiet. So first, we need to spend time deeply listening to our teens. They are different than we were, right? They have different agendas and different concerns. We need to understand those concerns, really deeply understand them in order to help them. And secondly, more in line with my message today, I think we need to help teens learn to listen to themselves, to shut out that external noise once in a while and listen to their own knowing, their own values, their own needs, their own desires. Let me do another hand raise with you. And how many of you wish that you had had more encouragement to explore your values and preferences? How many of you wish you had had that encouragement and that might have made a difference in your life? And while Kathy tallies that up, I will tell you that William Burroughs says that the aim of education is knowledge, not of facts, but of values. And my work day to day in helping my clients evaluate what my work day to day is to help my clients evaluate what matters to them most, and then to develop strategies based on their values for getting their needs met. So this is the work I do all the time, starting with helping my clients identify what matters to them. What's the hand raise on this, Kathy? What did we get?
Well, Elsbeth, it looks like there are about 24 out of 91 that answered that one.
Oh, okay. So maybe it's not as important for everyone. Maybe others don't see it as important. Maybe after I talk today, you'll see why I think knowing about values and teaching values is really important before teens start dating. Let me tell you about Tricia, who's 15, one of my clients, who sat in my office silently unless asked a direct question. But when I asked her an open-ended question, she would respond with, "I don't know." "Why are you in therapy? What do you want to improve or change in your life?" "I don't know." That was always her answer. And you can imagine my frustration as a therapist, because I wanted to help her, but I didn't know how to help her. I didn't know what she wanted to adjust or change. Her parents had sent her to therapy because she was isolating and spending way too much time in her room and wasn't hanging out with her friends and had recently begun cutting. And I asked Tricia, "Do these things bother you? These things your parents are concerned with?" And her answer was, "I don't know." I finally told her that she could say anything in my office that she wanted aside from "I don't know." And it took many sessions for Tricia to warm up and to trust me, but eventually she told me more about her life, her recent loss of her dog, her friends turning her back on her, her parents' frequent and fierce arguing, and she admitted finally that she was sad and lonely and angry and was cutting as a way to refocus her pain. She knew a lot, in spite of her facade of "I don't know." So why did I hassle her so much about her statement that she didn't know? It's my belief that she's a sitting duck as an adolescent girl if she believes, concludes, or presents that she doesn't know. She's at risk to put herself in the hands of others to decide for her what she should think, feel, and do if she doesn't spend enough time knowing what matters to her. This not knowing what one thinks, feels, and wants is particularly troubling when teens start dating. The lack of clarity and self-awareness and self-definition sets a teen in a perfect position to be manipulated and coerced. And then add to this poor judgment from an immature brain and a lack of experience in life, and there's the possibility of physical, emotional, or mental injury that's highly likely. Teens need encouragement to know what they're thinking, feeling, and needing in order to direct choices in their decisions. And many children aren't given this information at home. We train our kids to be compliant and responsive to the needs of adults, and we often neglect to encourage them to be introspective, to be aware of themselves, and to be expressive of their own knowing. I make my living at doing this, right? I make my living at raising consciousness and raising awareness so that people can see and then steer their own lives. Let's look more at the costs of teens not knowing their values. I want you to have a piece of paper and pencil handy. I should have told you this right from the start, but grab a piece of paper and pencil or just jot some mental notes in your head if you can about what are the consequences of teens not knowing their own values. I think that when teens don't know their own values, they tend to follow the crowd or the trends or the expectations of others, desiring to fit into what others think might be a good thing, and it's not always wise. Others may be doing drugs and alcohol, skipping school, Snapchatting parts of their bodies to each other, harassing a peer. These behaviors can have negative consequences, and some of those consequences can be quite severe. Secondly, I think that teens can be manipulated and led in partnerships. If they don't know what healthy relationships are, they may accept mistreatment. They can be hurt by trusting someone that's untrustworthy. Third concern that I would have is that they don't become fully aware of their own uniqueness when they're not encouraged to be introspective and to know themselves. They don't know their distinctive talents or interests or skills. And then, sadly, the constrictive expectations and demands of others, of parents, of culture, of the outside world can lead to a kind of reactiveness or rebellion or acting in opposition to those demands and expectations of others. So we need to give teens chances to experiment, to find what is true for them, to explore their own values, and not just have values imposed upon them. I have a client, Julie, who was encouraged, well, not encouraged, more than encouraged. She was forced to do gymnastics as a young girl and hated it, didn't want to do it, but complied because she was a good girl and was, okay at gymnastics. But as she grew older and all this fussing with her mom for years about this gymnastics, she discovered tennis, and she became quite a star, actually, at tennis. And she didn't know her skill at tennis because she was complying to her mother's demand that she be a good gymnast. And I think this kind of thing happens over and over again when we impose our expectations on others, on our teens, and not let them learn and experiment for themselves. So how do we do this? How do we help our teens explore their values? What are ideas for doing that? How do we make this possible for them to see what matters to them? One thing we can do is redirect focus. When people like my client Tricia say, I don't know, we can ask them to tell us, well, what do you know? Even if they tell us, well, what I know is I don't want to talk to you about it, that's good, because that's the self-definition, right? That's some clarity about what they want or don't want, and that is better, I think, than saying that they just don't know. Secondly, we can do things that encourage self-reflection. We can talk to them about journaling or reflective writing exercises, or get them in a peer group where they can get some feedback from others, or have them in conversation and dialogue with others about what's important to other people. I use these things called virtue reflection cards, which I just love. There's 100 of them, these virtues on cards. They're beautifully done. The resource and link to this card deck, it's from a place called Virtues Project, is available on your resource list that you'll get today with this webinar. So I use things like that, playful ways to get teens to understand what virtues and values even look like, and to sort them and decide how's one more important than another for them. Thirdly, we can explore values and preferences directly by exposing them to values clarification activities. There's a whole bunch of these activities out there. When I was young, I did and in college I did a values auction, and I have used that, repeated that little activity a number of times in my life with groups of people, helping them identify their values by just auctioning off different values and seeing how much you're going to spend on serenity, or how much you're going to spend on peace or harmony in relationships. There's a website, Advocates for Youth, that has a whole bunch of values clarification exercises, and again, you'll find that on your resource list. The fourth thing we can do is help teens identify what their strengths are, what matters in them that's strong, what is good in them, what is big in them, what are their strengths, what are they good at. There's a test that I love to use with my clients called Values in Action, or VIA, and it's on Martin Seligman's website, AuthenticHappiness.org. It's a free values clarification test of strengths, really. These are the things that I'm strong in, and then my clients end up with a list of 5 signature strengths. It's free. It's also on the resource list. And then finally, we can help them identify their relationship values. What matters most to them in partnership? What is that about? And my things to know before you say go cards, which we'll talk about a little more in a bit, are a great way for teens to evaluate what matters most to them in partnership. Second thing we can do, aside from teaching values, is to teach teens to exercise their power to choose. We want teens to know that they have the freedom to say yes, and they have the freedom to say no. And of course, not knowing who you are makes it much harder to make these kinds of choices. And having choice is kind of a radical notion for some people. The 19th Amendment giving women the choice of political leadership didn't happen until 1919, not even 100 years ago. So for some people, this idea of choice is kind of new. And we have factors that influence this freedom of choice, like poverty, disenfranchisement, minority status, family history. All these things affect our sense of choice, and we need to be sensitive when we're working with teens what those restrictions might be in their culture or their family, but offer them freedom as much as we can to choose within those sometimes limiting constraints. Somebody told me once that there are 3 kinds of people: those that make it happen, those that watch it happen, and those that wonder what happened. And I use this a lot in my work. And I want to help. I want to do what I can to help my clients and the teens in my life live a life where they don't end up wondering what happened. How do we help teens expand their awareness of choice? Think about that. Write some ideas down or make some notes in your own head about what would you do to help teens feel their freedom to have choice. What do we do? One idea I have is that we can mix things up. We can ask them to sit in a new seat, take something new off the menu, break an old pattern just for fun, decide how you want to spend your own allowance, pick a new study partner for today, something that encourages them to do something different where they have to make choice and feel their power to say yes and to say no. We can also help them challenge their perceived limits. We can help them see things differently. If your student, let's say Damon, comes to you and says, I'm really crappy at math, I'll never be good at math, you could help him challenge his limits by reflecting back what you hear him saying and then reframing that for him, helping him reframe the possibilities. So you could reflect it back and say, oh, you believe you'll never be good at math. Well, is that true, Damon? Is it really true? Is there another perspective that you could take? What would that be? Is this your story or somebody else's story? These are reframing questions that may help Damon come to a different conclusion, like I would have to work really hard in order to improve my skills at math, which is much more powerful and there's more freedom in that I'll never be good at math. Ram Dass says how we define things confines things. So I'm kind of a word police in my office with my clients where I'm constantly reminding them or reflecting to them how they're saying things and helping them open up the framing of how they say things so that the possibilities are visible to them. Number 3, we can weigh options. When we have our daughter comes and says, Mom, I don't like my job, I'm going to call in sick. Well, we can explore the options of that. We can weigh the options. What would be the pros of calling in sick, and what are the cons of calling in sick? We can think through the consequences, both long-term and short-term, with our teens so that they can see the effect of making a particular choice. The 4th thing we can do to help them expand choice is to help them with visualizing things. What would the positive outcome look like? What would it look like if you were really successful at math, for example? And the research on visualization says that it works really, really well if you visualize also the work that it takes to get to where you want to be. So you'd have to have Damon, this kid that believes he can't do math, you'd have to help Damon visualize himself studying or getting a tutor or working hard at doing calculations so that he could build his skill at doing math. So we want to help him visualize the possibility as well as the reality, the work that's necessary, and to visualize himself successfully doing that work. And the last thing I believe we can do is we can encourage experimentation, which is kind of scary for us, right? Because these teens experiment in ways that make us feel really uneasy. But I think teens need some permission to find their edges and their boundaries within some safety. Here's a situation of Zachary. He comes to you and he complains that at the party he has to play the drinking games or his friends are going to be angry with him and not invite him to any more parties. What could you do to help Zachary in this situation if you want to help him see his power to choose? Well, we could tell Zachary that drinking at his age is harmful and could put him in danger. We could let him know he shouldn't be hanging out with friends who try to control him. That's good advice. We can empathize with Zachary's dilemma. We could reflect and explore the struggle that he's in. We could ask what his discomforts might be telling him. We could teach him how to listen to his own inner challenges. That's called empathy. We could ask Zachary what he imagines the consequences to be if he didn't play along, both the positive and negative consequences. That's weighing the options. And the last idea was we could help Zachary see himself successfully speaking up for what he wants. That's visualization. All of these are great options, but none of them will be heard by Zachary without first doing number 2, which is empathy. Empathy is the ingredient that allows wisdom to be absorbed. Empathy is like an enzyme. It's a catalyst that facilitates transformation. Without sufficient empathy, you cannot make a connection and your wisdom will not be imparted. Now, just to tell you, I'm not going to go as in depth in the next 8 points as I have with these first 2, because awareness of values and awareness of choice is foundational to all the other aspects of teaching teens about healthy partnerships. If teens don't get training in knowing themselves, excuse me, and exercising their power to choose, the other points that I will be discussing are not potent enough on their own to make much of a difference. But let's look at these other factors that we can layer on top of clarity of values and choice. We want to discuss with our teens that pretending can make love messy. And the hardest part of pretending is knowing when do you stop, and then what happens when the truth is revealed. We live in a world that's full of encouragement to pretend, to appear to be smarter, appear to be richer, appear to be better looking, appear to be more successful than we actually are. Carl Jung says the privilege of a lifetime is to become who we truly are. Or as I've heard it said, be yourself, everyone else is taken. So how do we invite teens to step into being who they really are? For them, they don't even know who they really are, right? They're in the middle of experimenting, trying to figure out who they really are. They don't know themselves well. Their experience on the planet is pretty limited. They haven't been maybe hearing the message that they should self-examine and choose how they want to be in the world. And even if they're given that message, it's still hard because they're at the beginning stages of self-awareness and trying on all sorts of personas or attitudes or affiliations. And in spite of this chaos, I think it's important that we help them see the dangers of pretending to be something that they are not. So let me ask you to think about this and write some answers down or jot some ideas down about how is faking it a problem in relationships? How is it a problem if you're faking it? What would we want to tell teens if they said, oh, it's no big deal? We'd want to say, oh, yeah, it's a big deal, and let me tell you why. You tell them this. You feel much more anxiety and tension when you fake it. Mark Twain says, I always tell the truth because then I don't have to remember who I told what to. Living in truth and not pretending leads to an ease and a comfort, both internally and relationally. Secondly, you don't know if you're pretending if you're loved for who you are or only loved for your mask. Thirdly, your partner may feel tricked, confused, angry, disappointed when the truth is revealed, and that erodes trust in the relationship. And fourth, you're more likely to attract others that are also pretending, since like attracts like, and then it's going to be hard for you to feel like you can trust them because you know that they're probably putting on a face as well. And finally, faking it becomes this vicious cycle. We pretend. When we pretend, we get anxious. When we let me just show you this vicious cycle here. When we fake it, there we are. We're not true to ourselves. We're inauthentic. We're not comfortable in our own skin. This increases our anxiety. We become unsettled, ill at ease, worried what others are thinking, worried that others are going to notice what our discomfort is, that we're in a state of discomfort. That's going to lead to all this self-doubt, which makes us feel inadequate, not okay the way we are, so then we fake it, and this erodes self-esteem. So there's this vicious cycle that comes with pretending that is pretty hard to get off of. When we're encouraged and allowed to pretend early in our lives by our family or by our society or by cultural expectations, we can develop this pattern of looking outside of ourselves to find out if we're acceptable, adequate, or meeting the standards. The concern for others evaluation is quite a powerful thing. It makes us, buy a new car, go on a restrictive diet, maybe cheat on a test, get cosmetic surgery, all these things so that we can be seen as good enough in somebody else's eyes. This is called other esteem, and it's kind of addicting. The solution to this compulsion to pretend or to live for external validation is to learn, excuse me, to learn to assess for yourself your own conclusions about how you're living your life. To assess for yourself, do I like it? Am I liking the way I'm doing it? Do I like the way I'm washing the dishes? Do I like the way I'm doing the webinar? Do I like the way I'm driving my car? Am I comfortable with the way I'm acting in my life? This question builds self-esteem in contrast to other esteem. If you learn to like yourself and your behavior, you won't feel the same compulsion to pretend to be different than who you are. So now, how do we help teens learn how to do this, to assess for themselves and to learn to like themselves? I use this lovely little armband, wristband thing called Do I Like It? That's all it says on it is Do I Like It? And I call it a self-esteem builder bracelet. It encourages teens to assess for themselves. I use this with adults as well as teens, by the way, to assess for themselves if they like or don't like the way they're designing the moments of their lives. When they bump into the bracelet on their arm, they say to themselves, okay, I bumped into the bracelet while I'm driving my car. Let me assess myself while I'm driving my car. Do I like it? Do I like the way I'm doing it? If I don't like it, then I can redesign. I can slow down. I can get my foot off the gas. I can, make the shift that I might need to make in order to like the way I'm doing my life. That often is quite a complex thing to figure out, like how do I change my life if I'm doing it in a way I don't like it? And that's part of the strategies that are discussed in therapy. But if I do like it, then I get to celebrate. Woohoo! I'm living my life the way I want. I get to notice that I'm living a good life, or I'm choosing, or I'm driving, or I'm acting in a way that I feel good about. So when I teach this to my clients, I offer them a handout. It's called the Self-Encouragement Handout. It's available to you as a PDF along with this webinar. You could see more about these bracelets and a little video about them if you're interested on my Courage to Bloom website. The fourth thing I think we need to teach our teens is to take off the rose-colored glasses and have a realistic look. Ooh, this is no fun, right? Facing reality is a core task of my work as a psychologist. Our definition, right, of being crazy is not being in reality, being out of touch with reality. So my job is to move people towards sanity, towards being in touch with reality, having an honest look at it, and coming to terms with it. And this is not an easy undertaking for me or for my clients. We have a lot of buildup in our lives as individuals for pretending and denial and for avoidance of the discomforts of reality, because reality is kind of harsh. What I'm wanting to do in my work is to help people jump on this truth cycle, to live in reality, to face things as they are, to speak the truth to themselves and to others, to limit their compulsion to escape, to numb and deny. This allows us then to live with the normal anxiety of living, which is quite intense, but it's normal. It's not additional anxiety caused by faking it. When we're living and facing this normal anxiety, we can look for resources, get support, develop healthy and sustainable coping skills. That leads to good self-management, which allows us to live authentically, to be able to soothe and comfort ourselves, and this builds self-esteem, which allows us to live well in reality. So that cycle is the cycle I try and move my clients off of the pretend cycle and into this truth cycle. How do we help teens do this? How do we help them take off the rose-colored glasses as they approach romance and relationships? It's kind of a harsh thing, so I've created a playful way to do that, and that's these cards that I mentioned earlier called Things to Know Before You Say Go. This is a way for teens to assess values for themselves, but then also as they're exploring romance, to evaluate, to stack the cards for how the partner that they're dating or wanting to date might stack up to their own values and preferences. This allows teens to get a close picture of the person they're dating and who they really are, to observe, assess, and decide if that person matches what matters to them. I tell my clients to watch how another person that you're interested in dating, watch how they're walking through the world. Just watch how they're walking through the world. And if you like it, ask if you can walk next to them. And if you don't, then walk another way. Dibble has put together an activity book of 30 activities that go with things to know cards, and those are available at the Dibble website. Again, the references for all these tools are on your resource list. Here's a simple activity that comes from the book or similar to what's in the book, and that is taking 5 cards. So I'll randomly do this with clients. I'll randomly pull 5 cards out of the deck, and I'll say, all right, here are 5 cards. Sort them according to your to what's most important. And this is a challenging task. One card might be sensitive. Is this person sensitive to others' feelings and needs? Friends. Does this person get along with their friends? Can this person accept it when I say no or set a boundary? Is this person playful and fun to be with? Do I treasure this person? Well, geez, all of those are kind of important. Given that I'm a playful person, I might put playful higher up on the list than somebody else might. But I kind of also like someone that's sensitive, and I sure would like to treasure them, and how they get along with their friends kind of matters. So just having that conversation about, wow, it's kind of hard to sort these, hard to decide which one doesn't matter. And that's the point of this activity, is helping our teens see that there's so much that they need to know and assess in partnership before they jump right in. The 5th thing I think we need to teach our teens is that they should date someone that doesn't need a makeover. My client Kendra is a great example of this. She was dating Mike in high school and then moved in with Mike and his family after she graduated. And she had this belief that Mike would stop drinking and drugging after he started college, but his drugging and drinking got worse actually as he got into college years. And 5 years into the relationship, she came to me asking for help. And her goal in coming to therapy was to find ways to help Mike wake up. Kendra was stuck in a terrible dilemma. She was deeply attached to this young man who was quite toxic for her. She didn't want to leave him. She didn't want things to be as they were either. She had lots of desire for change, absolutely no power to make change the way she wanted, which was to have Mike be different. She needed to have a good look at Mike as he was, not as she thought he could be. She needed to honor her own knowing as well as her own emotional experiences. She needed to face his dishonesty, his lack of consistent availability to her, his unacknowledged addiction, and she needed to recognize her feelings of pain, anger, fear, and dashed hopes. Facing this reality was tough for Kendra. It took her many months and many varied and ultimately unsuccessful attempts to change Mike, but she eventually walked away from the relationship. But things had to get much worse, of course, before she was able to do that. But she needed to see that Mike, and she did see that Mike wasn't able or willing to sufficiently change in a direction of being a healthy partner. Kendra, of course, could have saved herself years of heartache and stress if she'd had a realistic look at Mike from the start, but the reasons she didn't are complicated by her own family of origin and their tolerance and denial for addiction. So she hadn't learned to look for these things. So how do we help teens learn to look for these things? How do we help them accept somebody else as they are rather than projects to fix? Think about that for a second and come up with some ideas. How do we help them learn how to accept people and not try and fix people? First, I think we need to teach teens to listen and honor their own feelings. If someone doesn't feel right, maybe they're not right. We need to learn to listen to, and honor the disquiet and inquire about what that discomfort might be trying to communicate to us. Secondly, we need to teach these observational skills like my things to know cards, assessing somebody, seeing them for who they truly are, not dating their potential, but dating their actuality. Third, I think we need to teach teens to know how to courageously face and accept reality. It's hard to do, but it's a much more stable way to walk through life when we're not living in pretend. The fourth thing we can do is teach our teens speak up skills. Those are things like naming out loud their feelings and their needs to others, setting boundaries and limits with others, asserting their rights with others. And finally, I think we need to, oh, there they are, look at that. Finally, we need to teach them about abundance versus scarcity. There's a lot of fish in the sea. They don't know that. They're new to this world, right? They don't know. And so I'm not sure that just telling them is going to help, but I think we need to show them there are lots of opportunities for you to date and not be stuck or stay stuck in a relationship that's not satisfying. All these lessons are challenging to teach teens, especially when they come from environments where this kind of message is not delivered directly to them or frequently to them. And I think the best we can do as educators is to give them another taste of a possible perspective. You could say to a teen that's caught up in a makeover relationship, what would you do with your energy if you turned your focus to something you could actually do something about, like advancing your own success and contentment? We need to pose those kinds of questions to them so they can see another possibility. The sixth thing we could do is to teach our teens not to ignore, minimize, or keep silent about their discomfort. Listening to discomfort is part of being real and honest and clear about what matters to you. People often ignore their pain when they are trained by their environments around them, their families, or wherever, to be numb, to be silent, and to concern themselves excessively with others' well-being. If they're in an environment that's sort of encouraging them to do that, it's pretty easy for them to pick that up and to do that, to numb themselves to the discomfort. This is what got Kendra into such a pickle. She saw the signs of dishonesty in Mike and his alcohol abuse and his lack of follow-through, but she decided they were not a big deal to her because her background had trained her to tolerate mild forms of mistreatment rather than pay attention to them as indicators of possible future behavior. And sometimes pain and even violence is ignored because it starts out small and it seems tolerable, like the frog that's placed in water and the heat is turned up and the frog stays in to the point of boiling, killing the frog. Maybe we need to see that the roots of violence, maybe we need to see that the roots of violence are any form of power over another person. That's a different definition. Gandhi says every time we impose our will on another, it's an act of violence. This might be a good measure to share with our teens. Here's some pretty alarming statistics. Did you know that 1 in 3 girls in the U.S. is a victim of physical, emotional, or verbal abuse from a dating partner? These statistics will be on your, you'll get a PDF of this information with this webinar. 1 in 10 high school students is purposely hit, slapped, or physically hurt by a boyfriend or a girlfriend. And 1/4 of high school girls have been victims of physical or sexual abuse or date rape. So let's do a poll here. How many of you have worked with teens who have been in abusive partnerships in the last year? Have you worked with a teen in the last year that's been in an abusive partnership? Kathy will help gather that information and give that to us. In the meantime, Kathy, I'm going to just show this slide, which is about the 21 early warning signs of abuse. This is also a handout that will come with the webinar today. I suggest that you post this or similar lists for your students to see and to make clear the resources and supports that are available in your community and to discourage your teens from being silent about their discomfort. What are the numbers, Kathy?
Elsbeth, it looks like 70% have said yes and 30% said no.
Wow, that's sad. And I'm so glad these teens have you there. All right, let's move on to what else we can do to encourage great romance. We can teach teens to believe in yourself and attract someone that believes in you too. Be the person you want to attract. Help teens accept themselves and strive to improve their possibilities, both personally and relationally. We might ask teens directly, what would it be like to really love and appreciate yourself the way you are? knowing and accepting your faults, working to improve what you can and what you want to improve in yourself. And now imagine that you have a partner who's willing to do the same thing for you, with you. Wouldn't that be grand? This is the kind of image that we need to plant in the minds of our young people. Hey, Kathy, I can hear you there. Maybe you can mute yourself. And this is so much easier to believe in yourself when you grow up in an environment that supports that and encourages that and tells you that. But if you don't have an environment like that, this may be the first time that you hear this kind of message. Maybe you hear it at school for the first time from your teacher. I think the role of a holistic educator is to offer kids a chance to hear something healthy, hopeful, and true, and to be met with an attitude of respect and care that in turn fosters their ability to begin to build care for themselves. A line I use often in my work is that the unconscious mind believes anything it's told long enough or strong enough. So I think we need to help our teens. How do we help our teens believe in themselves? I think we need to tell ourselves frequently and loudly that they're worthy of being loved and cherished. I think we need to speak out against mistreatment and disrespect in all forms around us. Maybe just saying a simple thing like, that doesn't feel so good to me, or I wouldn't like to be talked to like that, or a tool that my clients often use is just saying ouch. When there's disrespect in the room, to just simply say ouch. That marks it, that makes it noticeable, and people often will question, why are you saying ouch, Mom? Why are you saying ouch? And then you have a chance to explain, that didn't feel good to me. I wouldn't like to be talked to like that. We can let teens know that relationship skills are learned. They're not innate, they're learned. So they can learn them. They can discover how to do this. This is something they can be taught. And so our job is to teach it, right? That's our job as parents, as educators, as teachers. If they don't hear it, these things in their homes, and they don't hear it from you, where are they going to hear it? It's our job, I believe. We've talked today about several strategies already that could be employed to help students believe in their goodness: the clarification of values, the embracing of their freedom to choose, their living in authenticity and reality, building their self-esteem, having and showing intolerance for disrespect and abuse. All these are essential factors that teach teens how to teach the teens about their rights to be respectful. And to be respected and loved in a relationship. Brene Brown, one of my heroes, says, if you think that dealing with issues of worthiness and authenticity and vulnerability are not worthwhile because there are more pressing issues like the bottom line or attendance or standardized test scores, you are sadly, sadly mistaken. She says it underpins everything. The eighth thing I want to talk about, we're down to the final three here. The eighth thing is I think we need to teach teens to learn all about soothing and comforting themselves. David Schnarch, the author of Passionate Marriage, has done a lot of research on long-term passionate partnerships, and he concluded that the ability to self-soothe is a key component to healthy and enduring partnerships. People who know how to self-soothe don't blame others for their pain and discomfort, and they don't hold others responsible for making them feel better. The inability to self-soothe is a huge corrosive in a romantic partnership. So what does it mean to self-soothe? People that are self-soothers are able to own responsibility for bringing themselves back into balance. If someone or something upsets them, they take responsibility for their own behavior. They do that. They take responsibility for their own behavior, but they don't take other people's behavior personally. They keep things in perspective, they control their own actions, and they know how to cool themselves down when they get heated. Basically, they know how to self-regulate. One of the first rules for self-regulation is don't do anything to make a bad situation worse. So let's play with this a little bit with this example of Ryan, who goes to the mall with his friend Levi and some of Levi's friends, and they go walking around the mall. And after they've walked through a number of stores together, Ryan notices that Levi and his buddies are pulling away from him and leaving him behind. This is painful to Ryan, as he was hoping to create a better connection with Levi, but Levi wasn't showing the same interest. Ryan is miffed and disappointed that the afternoon wasn't going as he'd hoped. What is a self-soothing action that Ryan could choose? He could tell Levi that he's a lousy friend and that he should be more attentive and not so absorbed with his other buddies. That's called blame. He's blaming others. He could tell himself that that it's possibly his fault because he isn't as cool as the other guys. That's blame, but blaming himself. He could post something nasty about Levi and his friends on Facebook. It's called retaliation. He could get stoned with his friend Nate and try to put the situation out of his mind. That's called numbing. Or he could call a different friend and arrange to spend time with that friend soon and maybe even have that friend pick him up from the mall. That's a more healthy choice and a choice that is called self-soothing. He's taking responsibility for the care of himself. Great line. It's not your job to like me. That's my job. Second to the last thing we can do is to help our teens keep an eye on their thoughts and conclusions. We call that self-talk in my profession. It's the dialogue that happens in our heads. We need to pay attention to this so that we can assess our internal thoughts and our conclusions. What are we saying to ourselves? What's the story we're telling ourselves? We all tell ourselves stories, but the problem is when we believe these stories when they're not grounded in reality. Often our stories have lots of hooey and balderdash because they are something we make up with just little bits of data. Then those stories get repeated without question or scrutiny, and they cause us a lot of discomfort and injury. So we want to pay attention to what am I saying to myself about that. If we look at Ryan's situation as an example and his relationship with Levi, you can recall that he told himself at one point, or might have told himself at one point, that he's probably at fault because he's not as cool as the other guys. This is, of course, a great example of negative self-talk. If he could hear that, if he could hear himself say that in his head, and that's a hard thing, right? Turning up the volume of your own inner dialogue is a challenging thing. But if he could hear that, often it comes from confessing that storyline to somebody outside of himself and that person reflecting it back. But if he could hear it, then he could do some reframing of that. He could be asked some reframing questions that would allow him to turn his thoughts around from self-depreciating thoughts to self-supportive and rational thoughts. This could allow him to manage the challenging reality of being with a distancing friend without adding the complication of internal harshness, self-ridicule, or injury. Brene Brown again says, "Talk to yourself the way you would talk to someone you love." There are 15 common distorted thinking patterns. I use these all the time, or I talk about these a lot with my clients. There are ways to make this sort of playful and engaging. I use these distortion building and busting cards that I made, and I use those as a way to sort through these patterns and talk about these patterns with my adult clients and teen clients. But I think it's helpful that they have names for that kind of patterning that goes on, or those habitual habits in their head around distorted thinking. These are common. We all do these things, right? You know, pick a distortion. We do them. What we want to do is be aware that we're doing it. We want to be aware, oh, I'm blaming. Oh, I'm doing a shoulds. I'm filtering things. So the labeling, finding these names and labels, identifying these things helps us see it when, perhaps see it when it's happening, so that we can break the pattern apart and come to a more rational landing place. Again, this resource is available on your resource list. Finally, I want to talk about time really is your best friend and helping teens hear that message. There's so much that they need to know about themselves and about others. It's really wise to go as slowly as possible when approaching romance. There's a fun little quote. You have to walk carefully in the beginning of love. The running across fields into your lover's arms can only come later when you're sure that they won't laugh if you trip. As they are navigating the world of romantic partnership, my best advice is to go as slow as you possibly can. The line I use a lot is go only as fast as the slowest part of you feels safe to go, and to really help teens learn to listen to those hesitating parts. I hope that refreshing yourself about these important concepts about healthy and sustainable partnerships will help you in your work with your teens and help them have successful romantic partnerships in their lives. Thank you so much for letting me share today.
Thank you, Elsbeth. And I so appreciate that you added tips as to the how-to for those 10 main points. We have just a short few minutes for questions. If you have any questions for Elsbeth, please enter this into your question box. And if they're not answered, Elsbeth and I will surely make sure that those are answered, because we will get a report of the questions that you place in that question box. Do you have any questions, Kathy?
Yes, excuse me, we sure do. Carrie would like to know, how might you recommend using the things to know before you say go cards with individuals that are in foster care or those who may have been in human trafficked?
Wow, that's harsh. Hard. Those are hard worlds to come from. I think that just having dialogue about, there's 76 of these questions on the cards, and having dialogue and letting the dialogue lead, letting the conversation flow naturally from the cards as a stimulus, and then letting the following where the teen or the client wants to go. They're going to have stories. They're going to have things that they need to unload, and confusion about, this card says that I need to ask if this person is respectful to their friends, and the person that I was with was not respectful at all, and what do I do with that? And I'm really angry about that, and that was really confusing for me. So I think that the cards need to be sort of the skeleton or the scaffolding for the meat of this deep conversation that can lead all sorts of places. So I wouldn't use the cards in any kind of strict structured way, but as just the catalyst for a deep conversation.
Great.
I appreciate that answer too, and I'm thinking how they would go as a great resource for some. We have some people that do mentoring that use our student journals to take with them, and on one-on-one, it conjures up a lot of discussion, going much deeper into reflections on their past behavior, experiences, and choices that they're going to make in changes of that behavior.
Irene, just a follow-up with that as well. Carrie's asking, the large activity book that Dibble has published, would that work well with the youth going along with the cards that she's, the population she's working with or she's talking about?
That
Yes.
works, yeah, and that
I think
is
there would be activities
more
in.
group work.
Go ahead, Irene, I'm sorry.
The activity book is based for more group work than individual, I would think. Do you think, Elsbeth?
I think so. You could adapt those activities for individuals, but it's really made for a larger group. Yeah.
I think maybe the student journals that we have that go along with our Love Notes curriculum might be one, or the Relationship Smarts Plus might be more adaptive for that.
Okay. Esther has a question. Actually, she has a couple, and we'll try to get to at least one of them. How would you help a client who has been exposed or witnessed domestic violence in the home and who is just starting relationships?
I would tell them to go only as fast as the slowest part of them feels safe to go. Did I mention that? I would say I would really help them listen to their own caution, their own fears, and to honor that, and to pay attention to what to trust, to safety. They don't know how to trust. They've been in environments where they were exposed to things that were really harmful to them. So their trust is going to be damaged by that, and so time is going to be their friend as they approach romantic connections, and to be really in a place of one step back and assessing, and not just jumping in, because their assessment skills are going to be compromised by the fact that they were in a violent home. They won't know clearly what it is that matters, because they don't have the exposure to that, and what matters for a healthy relationship. So to be cautious and to be observant and to really get to know somebody well before trusting, before stepping in.
Great. Irene, do we have time for one more?
You know, I'm going to say I want to mention that Valentine gift, and maybe
Okay.
Elsbeth can take a question or two after that. Thank you for those who have stayed on, that we have this free gift of relationships and romance activity gift, a 1-year subscription, or I'm sorry, a 6-month subscription for that. It's a digital subscription, and from starting February 12th to March 12th, they will have access for free. All they need to do is register. They can register here, Kathy, or how can they register for that?
Yes. Actually, you'll get a link when you get the you'll get an email after you get off of this webinar, and you'll get an email that has the link in it as well.
And you'll notice the beating heart, the healthy heart beats in a regular rhythm, and that's exactly what we're aimed for. Anyone who places an order on our website today will have free shipping. You use the code webinar at checkout. And next, what are we doing next month, Kat?
Well, this is going to be a really interesting webinar on in March. It's called Understanding Teen Dating Relationships Through Concept Mapping. We all know that teen dating violence has kind of surfaced as one of the significant public health issues these days. And the U.S. Department of Justice, when they've been seeing this, they contracted with an outside company called Concept Systems, and they conducted a study that that helped us to better understand how youth conceptualize teen dating and teen dating violence. And the results of the study are going to be talked about by two folks that actually worked on this study for the U.S. Department of Justice. And so that's going to be really interesting. And I will say that when you register, when you register for the March webinar, you will be able to get the link to read the report as well. So you'll be kind of ahead of the learning curve when you listen to the March webinar. And the invitation for this webinar and the place to register will be on our website beginning tomorrow. So I'm looking forward to that, Irene.
Oh, that does sound like a really interesting one, a little different take on relationships. Well, thank you for joining us today. And there is, to remind you, there's a brief survey at the end of this webinar. We really appreciate your feedback. And any questions that you have after this, you can contact myself, Irene at Dibble Institute, or Kathy at Dibble Institute. And any curriculum questions, we'll be happy to help you with that. Training ideas, and also grant writing. We can work as technical advisors to you for that. And if do we have a minute to anyone who might have a question who's hung on to ask one question or something?
Yes, I think this is an interesting question, Elsbeth, about your things to know before you say go cards. How about using those cards to work with teens with severe learning disabilities? Have you ever seen or have you ever used these cards with those with that particular population?
Not specifically, although I've used those cards with young grade school kids. So that's, those kids aren't quite as sophisticated. When you're using the cards, the concepts on the cards will need a lot of explanation if you're working with younger kids or if you're working with somebody with disabilities. So the dialogue and the explanation and the examples that may come from those cards would be really important when somebody doesn't have the ability to just grasp the concept right away.
And I'd like to mention, if I might, that we do have Mike's Crush curriculum, which is a video-based resource for relationships for some students with disability as well, and that is aimed at preventing stalking and abuse. So it's another angle to go at. Anything else, Kathy, that pops out at you before we leave?
Well, just a couple things. I will remind you that I'll be having the recorded webinar up by Tuesday of next week. Along with that will be a PDF of this webinar and also different PDFs that Elsbeth mentioned, the resource guide, for instance. I also would really encourage you. We've mentioned a lot of resources, particularly the things to know before you say go. I really encourage you to go to our website at dibbleInstitute.org and look under our bookstore, and you can click down to things to know before you say go. And on that landing page, there is a sample activity. You can kind of see a sheet of the card so you can get an idea of some of the things that are on the cards, and also gives you a little bit more information about the cards and about Elsbeth. So I encourage you to do that, and please feel free to call me if you need more information.
Well, Elsbeth, if I haven't thanked you enough, thank you for your
it's my
wonderful
pleasure.
insights today. And thank you, audience. Have a wonderful Valentine's Day. May your hearts all be full of love and happiness on that